To cut a long backstory short, my wife 30, and I 31, have been living separated for about 1.5 years, married for 7 years. 1 year of the separation was in the same house because of our 3 children currently living with me, but the new agreement will be 3 and 4 days in alternation with each of us parents. Before the separation, there was a marriage crisis, also some bad bedroom problems, which we tried to solve with professional help, but at that time, she probably already did not want any more. Before the new arrangement, we saw each other regularly and also talked. Now she has recently remembered that as a child she had a very traumatic experience, which was probably triggered during the marriage crisis. There are also parallels to what happened. She will discuss this and other unprocessed with a psychologist and has already made an appointment. Since she moved out, she has already had several affairs because for her the marriage only exists on paper now. She is also more or less looking for something new, but is also still unclear about what she wants at all. Before the childhood trauma came out, I was actually ready to inform myself about divorce law steps because I realized there was no hope. But since I know about that trauma, I am not really sure anymore. Somehow I have the hope that through the psychological talks that are pending, she can process all the problems and pain from the time before me, and also what happened in the crisis, and then possibly imagine coming back. I know the chance of this is extremely small, and it would probably be healthier for me to just make the cut, but somehow I can no longer let her go so easily because of the new knowledge. Her understandable reason why she doesn't want to try it again is the lack of trust and the fear that it will fall back into the old pattern after a certain time. I'm pretty messed up emotionally, and also scared of the decisions I'll probably have to make and accept. I think I need someone with a neutral point of view. If anyone has any tips on how I can change my mindset to stop seeing hope, I would also appreciate it. Update. Some time has passed since my last post. Small recap. My wife moved out a while ago, and in the meanwhile met and had sexual contact with other men. Due to new findings, childhood trauma, for which she now wants to go to therapy, not sure if she is actually doing it. I was not sure whether I should have hope or not. I have since tried to keep the contact to a minimum and only discuss things that concern the children. This has worked more or less well, although we still had a lot of contact, especially because of the upcoming birthday of one of our children. I felt better, but of course, still had many bad thoughts about what she does or doesn't do in regard to men. During the last conversation, she assured me that she would not meet any other men anymore, because she didn't want to, and she had to find out what she really wanted first. I was sure that she did it anyway, but had no proof. Then was the birthday of my child. We were together with the family. She was of course also present. For me, it was super weird. I felt really uncomfortable as she puts on happy life and spoke like a friend to me while everything was broken. I also felt that something was weird. The kid's birthday party was planned for the day after. I called her in the morning and told her I thought it would be better if she didn't come. The kids were with me that day anyway. I explained why, but she insisted on coming. The party was going well, the kids had fun, and all. But I couldn't resist, and then it happened. I couldn't stand it. I checked her cell phone and read the 1 or 2 men, and that they were also coming to her house and spending the night. I must say that I mentioned several times that I didn't want my children to sleep in the same bed where she was doing things with men. She agreed with me and said she didn't want that either. In an angry reaction, I told her to leave the party. When she asked why, I told her that I had read her messages. After that, it escalated a bit. She was angry because I had disregarded her privacy. I did not care. I told her how could she be so dishonest, and that she should leave. I told her that I never wanted to see her again. She tried to justify herself with sentences like, I tried not to see him again, but I'm only human and weak. It got a bit ugly in the conversation, but then she left. Later, I got a message where she admitted to sleeping with men, and that she would continue to meet with the one. She said she didn't give a crap about me now, and she didn't care about my feelings anymore. She talked about how great the sex was, and that she has orgasms. She literally wrote that. She also wanted to report me for violating her privacy. She thinks I hacked her phone or installed some software, but I still had a fingerprint registered, and said I provoked her. For me, this was the final straw. I now have an appointment with the lawyer, and will file for divorce. But what hurts me so much is the sentence about sex. I realize that she wrote that out of anger to hurt me, but it still knocked my confidence. Our sex life was always okay, but nothing special. I was her first, and she was always rather reserved to discover her own sexual passion, and had also mentioned earlier that she liked her experience. I am also afraid that now it will come to an ugly divorce, and it will be more of a rose war. Also regarding the children, and the fact that they will eventually see their mother with another man. I had a conversation yesterday with my daughter, close to 10 years old, who doesn't want to be with her mother because she feels uncomfortable there. She was sad because she wants her mother to move back in. I tried to explain to her why that was not going to happen. I told her that it had nothing to do with the children, that mom still loved her, and that I loved her more than anything, and would always be there for her. I am not sure how much I can tell my daughter. Something like she is dating other men, I think is rather wrong to say. I am also really scared about the future, and how I will feel. Update. I wanted to limit personal contact to an absolute minimum, and only what is necessary, because of the children, and started to follow through. A couple of weeks ago, I had planned a ski weekend with my kids. Just before we left, one of my kids started making a scene, because they didn't want to clean up the room. This led to discussions, and to the point that child said they didn't want to go with me, and wanted to stay with their mother. So I told the child to call the mother, and clarify that. Of course, it wasn't an option, because of work, and who knows what else. I was very emotionally charged at this time, because I was really looking forward to the weekend, and so were the kids, and because I still blame my STBX for the shattered situation, and how my kids feel. I had talked several times with said child about how it felt, and of course, they're doing really bad with it, quite the opposite of what the mother thinks, that must have no effect on the children. Anyway, I then took the phone, because I wanted a confirmation of what is now the matter. It got a little out of hand again, because I expressed to my STBX what I thought about it, and why it happened. She hung up on me, and I sent her a one-line email with the words, "You can hang up, but that doesn't change the truth." The whole thing was like before an emotional act on my side. Meanwhile, I managed better when I let the situation cool down first, and then react, "See later." This in turn triggered a very long answer from her, also definitely emotionally written, in which she described her truths. I will not elaborate here, but it was about what I did wrong, and how I treated her wrong. Also, she said that she didn't regret the affairs, one of them led to an abortion. How can you not regret that? So again, completely trying to shift the blame and responsibility onto me. Also, and this is the critical point, she wrote, "The truth is that I don't want you in my life anymore, and I am ready to divorce you." I took the opportunity to respond to her bullshit, and present things objectively, to show her what kind of bubble she's living in. And I took the opportunity to point out to her, that she was going to get a letter from my lawyer soon anyway about the divorce. I explained to her in detail, and objectively why I have no more hope for us. And then came the answer, "I did not intend to divorce, but apparently you have planned and organized everything." I did not care, and I did not go further into it by replying. The fact is that she is screaming for a divorce with all her behavior, and the things she has said. Maybe not in the illusory world that she has built up. Because according to her ideas, we would probably stay married, and be a family with everything that belongs to it. But she may continue to see other men. This has shown me that she is absolutely not aware of what she has done, and has not reckoned with the consequences. Presumably, she must have been shocked by my information. Since then, our contact has been almost exclusively related to the children. I have set up an app with a shared calendar, through which we can communicate about child-related things. On Friday 2 weeks ago, came the expected reaction. She wrote a text message that she had received the letter, and would read everything very carefully. I could literally feel her anger. She then made a few comments about the content, which showed me that she was very emotionally charged. She probably thought at the beginning that I was just making an empty threat, and now she has seen that this is not the case. As mentioned before, I also think that she is slowly realizing that her house of cards, and wishful thinking is collapsing, and she has to bear the consequences herself. 3 days after she received the letter, she wrote me the following message. I will translate it roughly. Dear OP, I have been longing to apologize to you for everything that happened, that you had to suffer because of me, and that I hurt you, and that everything is destroyed. But I also want to thank you for the fact that I was able to grow up with you. I hope you know that I will always be there for you when you need me, and I mean it. Since we didn't make it as a couple, I would be very happy if we could be good parents for the children, function harmoniously, and give them security. I hope I have expressed myself clearly. Thank you. What should I even think about this? What is she apologizing for? For everything. Of course, that makes it easy to not have to reflect properly. So she doesn't have to deal with what she did, and still hopes for forgiveness from me. She is always there for me. That was part of our vows, and obviously she didn't stick to it. Thanking me for growing up. Again, obviously she hasn't learned the most important lesson, how to handle crisis. And by that I mean the initial marriage crisis that probably triggered this, and after which she ended up in a continuous downward spiral. She clearly wants absolution from me. I don't think she is waiting for an answer from me. I think it's more that she has now said the things she wanted to say, and thinks she can now feel better about it. She also said at one point that she would now start to try to see things more positively. Basically what I had said to her for years, and now she's doing it after she already destroyed her family. I now have 1 week to decide, so there's no emotional reaction. Whether I should give her the satisfaction, or take it away from her with an answer. Namely to hold the truth before her eyes, and the things I above. I know, and see and all. But in this case, I don't think she is looking for contact, but rather absolution. And my answer would be then only to smash her desire, and possibly now inner peace, which I assume by the vague wording of this SMS and action itself. Oh, and the report of the abuse of privacy. She has at some point claimed that she was at the police, but she would not report me. Of course not, probably she was told that she has nothing in hand, and would only make a fool of herself. The divorce itself is initiated, but it takes between 6 to 12 months, until the whole thing is through. What do you think, should I answer, or rather not? It's not about wanting to save the marriage somehow. I don't see any hope for it. Also, I would not want it at all, with my wife as she was before maybe, but she has changed so much for the worse, and is now no longer the same. Update. A week ago I had written, and now I need advice again. I am struggling hard, and am just hurt and angry. Against my deepest desire for revenge, I have not responded to the message of Maestadx last week, because of the advice here. But the whole thing just won't let me go. I am sure she is living her life right now, and is happy. Finally out of the marriage, I filed for divorce, which she probably wanted for a long time. She probably even has a new relationship already. I think that because of the following, I got my oldest child a cell phone with which the kids can call me when I'm out of the house, and whatnot. It is also the number of the mother, because otherwise, the kids use the home phone, which is much too expensive. Now it happened that my eldest has tried to call the mother who has not picked up. Maestadx then later sent a text message to the kid's phone asking who the number belongs to. At 10 p.m., the cell phone was called with a suppressed number, 3 minutes later from the mother. So since I don't think my ex knows how to suppress the number, she was not alone. In addition, I contacted her Saturday through the co-parenting app, because she had forgotten to do something kids-related. The answer was that she could only do it on Sunday. So she was definitely away for the weekend, probably with her new guy. What I want to get at, I really want and see, but it seems that there is always some information coming to me that gives reason for speculation. And I absolutely cannot handle the fact that my ex is already happily in a relationship. She has no right to it in my opinion, while the kids and I suffer, just simply because she apologized, which probably wasn't even meant seriously, and then just started building a new life in her way. This is killing me, and I don't know how to deal with it. I don't want this to constantly haunt me and make me feel bad, because I'm triggered everywhere. I'm probably additionally so angry, because I know that as a divorced male with 3 kids, it's virtually impossible to meet a woman. I know because I tried, even though I don't think I ain't ready. I also tried without stating that I have kids, which worked better, but sure that won't lead to a real relationship. Of course she has no problem finding someone as a good-looking and naive young mother, you are certainly an easy target, or fetish of some. I doubt that most of them want something serious, but just take advantage of it. But if you are so ignorant and naive not to see that, you are happy in the moment, right? And I do not wish that for her, even though I know that this definitely suggests a bad character trait of mine. How do you deal with it? How do I change my mindset and stop caring about her? Why do I love and hate her at the same time? OP, sorry to be blunt, but your wife is a cake eater. She wants the stability from you with the children to support her lifestyle. She is the same person who said sex was better to belittle you. This is her way of justifying to herself that she is a better person, so don't respond, and you show her you are a man of your word, and go ahead with the divorce. Don't communicate with her anymore. Only through your lawyer or a court-approved co-parenting app. The truth has already been stated. She told you she didn't regret her affairs. It seems your children need some therapy as the reaction of your child suggests he is still struggling to come to terms. So focus all your energy on yourself and the child. They have seen their parents argue and heard things that children their age probably don't need to hear, so there may be some trauma that needs to be addressed, so reassure them through therapy. Good luck, as it's a long, hard road when children are involved. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on today's story. If there is a story you would like to share with me, please feel free to contact me. My heart was in my throat. It had been weeks since that stupid text message on my phone ruined everything. I was staying at Beth's, but even her spare room started to feel like a prison. The shame was suffocating, a relentless ache in my chest. I knew I needed to see him, to try and explain, even though I didn't have a damn clue how to make this better. One afternoon, I worked up the nerve to drive to his house. The one we'd picked out together, painted that warm yellow I loved so much. Walking up the path felt like a betrayal, my legs heavy. Every step closer squeezed the air from my lungs. I hesitated for what felt like an eternity outside the front door. Just the sight of it made me want to throw up, the memory of how he looked at me the last time I stood here making my stomach twist. Finally, I knocked, some pathetic little taps that even I could barely hear. He opened the door, and for a second, just a second, I saw a flicker of surprise and maybe even relief in his eyes. Then it was gone. His face went stone cold. "What do you want?" It was barely above a whisper, but it cut through me. I need to talk to you." My voice was stupid and shaky. God, I was already regretting this. Why did I think I could come here and fix anything? "There's nothing left to say," he said, each word heavy. "You made your choice. Wait, please, just listen." I was practically begging, hating myself and hating him all at once. How had I fallen so damn far? He opened the door a tiny bit wider, but he didn't invite me in. "You've got 5 minutes." Each of those 5 minutes felt like an eternity. I stumbled through apologies, lame excuses about how things got out of hand, and I never meant to hurt him. None of it felt real, even as I was saying it. I tried to explain how empty I'd felt, how Jake had made me feel alive, but it all sounded so hollow, so selfish. His eyes were so cold, so distant. He didn't buy a word. Finally, he cut me off. "You wasted those 5 minutes, he said, voice flat. "Get out." With that, he slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned. Then I turned and ran to my car, tears blurring my vision. It was over, really, truly over, and it was all my fault. The weight of that crushed me as I drove away, leaving any hope of fixing this lying shattered on his doorstep. Beth wouldn't stop talking about getting back out there. "Girl, you gotta rip that band-aid off," she'd say, shoving another margarita at me. I could barely stand the taste of tequila lately, but I drank it anyway, chasing that numbing effect. One night, Beth dragged me to some trashy club filled with cocky guys who thought they were God's gift to women. I spent most of the time slumped over the bar, lost in an alcohol-fueled fog and trying to ignore the throbbing ache in my head. That's when I saw him. Not Jake, thank God, but someone familiar, a guy from high school, Ryan, I think. He was older now, more filled out, but still had that kind of goofy grin. And he was definitely looking at me, not in a gross way, just interested, maybe even a little shy. Something snapped in me, maybe it was the booze, maybe the desperation to feel something other than miserable. Before I could talk myself out of it, I flashed him a smile back. One thing led to another. Flirting over cheap beers, sweaty bodies at the dance floor, the taste of his mouth on mine in the back of a dark Uber. The shame hit me like a truck the next morning. I was with someone else. Not my husband, not Jake, but someone who didn't know any of this mess. It was a different kind of betrayal, a new level of low I never thought I'd reach. And yet, there was a sick twist of excitement mixed in. It wasn't about Ryan, hardly even remembered him. It was the proof that I still could be desirable. I disgusted myself and still couldn't resist looking at my phone, half hoping, half dreading, that he might text. I knew this was getting out of control. It was like all my brakes were busted. I'd hurt the only man who ever truly loved me, and now I was dragging who knows how many others into my spiral. But I felt so damn powerless to stop. My heart raced every time I saw the letter M flash across my phone screen. My mom. At first, it was just concerned texts. Are you doing okay, honey? Or, missing you at Sunday dinner. But I knew the gentle probing would escalate into something more serious soon. She was relentless, my mom. One afternoon, her name popped up while I was at Beth's. I should have ignored it, but that nagging guilt, that relentless itch of anxiety, got the better of me. Just checking in, haven't heard from you in a while. Is everything alright? The words seemed innocent enough, but the cheerful emojis and exclamation points couldn't hide the worry in her voice. Panic flooded through me. I hadn't even told Beth about my parents knowing. Just busy, crazy time at work. I typed out a quick lie, hating the way my fingers fumbled over the keyboard. Beth shot me a worried look. You can't hide from them forever, she said, which was rich coming from her, considering she spent days dodging her own mom's calls. Later that night, I found myself fixating on the conversation. My mom was the best, patient, understanding, the kind of mom every girl wants. Lying to her made me feel like the lowest kind of scum. I could practically hear her voice, sad and disappointed, asking me what happened to the little girl she raised. The girl who always told the truth. That night I finally broke. I called her, voice trembling, and spilled everything. The affair, the lies, my husband kicking me out. She was silent on the other end for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke, her voice thick with tears. Come home, she said, just that. The next day, I packed my pathetic little bag and went home. I didn't know what to expect, whether they'd yell at me or offer awkward hugs. But when I walked through that door, my dad took one look at my tear-streaked face, pulled me in tight and said, welcome home, baby girl. Nothing else needed to be said. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe things could be okay, eventually. The first week back at my parents' house was a blur. Sleeping in my old childhood bedroom felt surreal, like I hit rewind on some terrible movie. Mom fussed over me, making my favorite comfort foods and offering endless cups of tea. Her kind gestures couldn't mask the sadness in her eyes, though. Dad took long walks every evening, his shoulders slumped with disappointment. I wanted to tell them it would be okay, but I couldn't even convince myself. One morning, the doorbell rang, and my whole body tensed. I held my breath as Mom opened the door. My husband stood there, looking tired and older than I remembered. His eyes, the ones that used to look at me with nothing but love, were now cold and distant. Can we talk? He said. The question wasn't really a question. My parents exchanged a worried look and stepped away without a word. He followed me to my room, and I shut the door. The silence echoed between us, a thick, suffocating blanket. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse. I don't want to drag this out. The lawyers already sent you the papers. Papers. Divorce papers. Even though I knew this was coming, it felt like a physical blow, sharp pain in my chest. I never wanted it to, I started, but he cut me off. Why? The word hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Why did you do this? 1,000 answers flashed through my mind. The excitement, the attention, feeling desired and alive again. All of it sounded so empty and stupid compared to the devastation I saw in his eyes. Disgust. A touch of pity, and something else. A flicker of a wound deeper than I could understand. I don't know, I choked out, which was the truth, the pathetic, cowardly truth. I messed up. Badly. He stared at me for a long, painful moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he simply nodded. He didn't offer forgiveness, didn't even raise his voice. He just turned and walked out. With every step down the hallway, it felt like any chance at fixing it, any hope for the future we'd planned, walked out with him. I fell on my bed and sobbed, a broken, wretched sound that filled the quiet room. Weeks blurred into an endless cycle of misery. Going back to work was out of the question, I couldn't face the whispers and pitying stares. Mom tried to drag me out for walks, Dad suggesting I get a hobby, anything to keep busy. But I just wanted to curl up into a ball and let the shame swallow me whole. Then, one day, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. My name was scrawled across the front in an unfamiliar, overly formal handwriting. My heart hammered in my chest as I tore it open. Inside were a stack of documents, with words like, summons, and, petition, jumping out at me. Divorce papers were one thing, seeing them in black and white was another. My husband wanted this over with, and fast. A fresh wave of nausea washed over me, and I bolted to the bathroom, emptying the measly contents of my stomach. Beth found me on the bathroom floor, clutching the papers. She read them, her eyes widening with every page. "This is real," she breathed, stating the obvious. "You have to do something." "Like what?" "Hire a fancy lawyer I can't afford." I snapped, the bitterness bubbling up. "He'll probably take everything." My voice trailed off. I realized I barely cared about the house or our savings. What terrified me was losing him completely, some judge finalizing the end of what I'd so carelessly broken. "You need to fight back," Beth said, her voice surprisingly firm. But there was no fight left in me. I'd already lost everything that mattered. Finally, the panic subsided, and a crushing numbness took its place. I called my husband, well, my soon-to-be ex-husband. I had to start getting used to that. His lawyer had given me his new number. His voice when he answered was cold, distant. I managed to choke out the words, "I'll sign whatever you want. Just make it stop." He didn't say anything, just hung up. There was no big fight, no dramatic showdown. Just me, signing my marriage away on a worn-out kitchen table with a cheap pen. It felt like a sick joke, the way life's most important moments could be reduced to paperwork and empty signatures. Life after the divorce papers felt even more empty than before. I was a ghost moving aimlessly through my parents' house. They barely recognized the woman I'd become, sullen, withdrawn, a shadow of their vibrant daughter. One afternoon, Mom sat next to me on the couch, her hand gently stroking my hair. "Sweetheart," she began, her voice soft, "you can't keep doing this to yourself. You need to get out of your own head." I wanted to tell her to go away, that she didn't understand, but her eyes held such a mix of concern and determination that I couldn't speak. "Your Aunt Lucy," she hesitated, "well, she lives alone now. Her little bakery could use some help. It would be a distraction, something to focus on." I just stared at the worn carpet, unable to imagine myself doing anything, especially not facing customers with the weight of my shame hanging over me. Yet, the alternative, endless days spent moping, seemed unbearable. With a sigh of resignation, I agreed. Maybe a bit of mindless work was exactly what I needed. The next day, I found myself driving to my aunt's town, a quaint little place I hadn't visited since childhood. Lucy was older, grayer, but her smile still held the same warmth I remembered. She welcomed me with a tight hug and a flurry of questions, mostly about how I was doing, which I politely sidestepped. When she led me into the bakery, a wave of nostalgia hit me, the sweet smell of cinnamon, the soft hum of the ovens. My tasks were simple at first. Measuring flour, kneading dough, icing cupcakes. It was repetitive, almost soothing, requiring just enough attention to distract me from the constant churning in my head. Some days, customers would smile at the girl behind the counter, the one with sad eyes and tired movements. They didn't know my story, didn't see the mess I'd made of my life. Maybe a little anonymity was exactly what I needed in order to start picking up the pieces. The bakery became a strange sanctuary. Even with the small town gossip swirling outside its doors, the steady rhythm of baking soothed something within me. Aunt Lucy was a surprisingly good, if unintentional, therapist. She didn't push me to talk about what happened, but between frosting batches of cookies and boxing up orders, she'd share little bits of wisdom. "Sometimes, the biggest messes are what make the best bread," she'd say while kneading a stubborn lump of dough. Or, "A cracked bowl still holds soup just fine," with a wink. I wasn't sure if she knew what had happened, but her quiet acceptance meant more than any words. One afternoon, a familiar figure walked into the shop. My stomach clenched. Jake. He looked different, shabbier, his usual cocky grin replaced by something like desperation. My first instinct was to run, to hide in the back room. But something held me back. I squared my shoulders, ready to tell him to get lost. His voice, when he spoke, was surprisingly soft, almost hesitant. "Look, I know I messed up. I was an idiot and you think that changes anything?" I cut him off, the bitterness I'd tried to bury rising to the surface. "What do you want, Jake?" He shifted from foot to foot, looking uncomfortable. "Honestly, I just wanted to see how you're doing." I scoffed, funny way of showing it, disappearing when things got messy. "Things got messy?" He echoed, "You blew up your whole life. My girlfriend kicked me out, I lost my job." He trailed off, then looked at me, a flicker of something like resentment in his eyes. We both made mistakes. The sheer nerve of it rendered me speechless for a moment. Finally, I regained my voice. Get out, it was a simple statement, my tone cold. He hesitated, then turned and slunk out of the bakery. Watching him go, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Finally, I was the one in control. I wouldn't let him back in, not when I was barely starting to rebuild what he'd helped shatter. Weeks turned into months at the bakery, and gradually, something shifted inside of me. Kneading dough felt less like therapy and more like a second nature. Aunt Lucy started trusting me with more responsibilities. Opening the shop, decorating elaborate birthday cakes, even chatting with regular customers. I was finding a rhythm again, a routine far removed from the chaotic mess I'd left behind. Then one day, the bubble burst. A group of women I vaguely recognized from high school walked in, giggling amongst themselves. They were customers, nothing more, but when they saw me behind the counter, their laughter went silent. The judgment was clear in their eyes. Their pity mixed with an odd sort of excitement, like they couldn't wait to recount the story of how they'd seen me, the town's scarlet woman, reduced to selling cupcakes. My face burned, shame and rage twisting in my gut. It took all my strength to smile politely and take their order. Once they left, I hurried to the back room, tears welling up in my eyes. All those weeks of feeling somewhat normal disintegrated in an instant. Later, Aunt Lucy found me slumped against the giant flour bags, silently sobbing. She didn't ask questions, just held me as I cried, then handed me a cup of strong, sweet tea. You know, she said finally, her voice gentle, it'll get easier. The gossip will die down, people have short memories. And some, well, you learn who your real friends are. That's when I told her everything. Not just about Jake and the affair, but the crushing guilt, the emptiness. All poured out in a messy, tearful confession. I expected her to be disappointed, maybe even disgusted. But her eyes just filled with sadness. Oh, honey, she sighed, stroking my hair. You made a foolish mistake, true. But you're not a bad person. You're just hurting. Her kindness broke me even further. For the first time in forever, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I might be worthy of forgiveness, even if I couldn't yet offer it. My name is Mark, and this is the story of how I lost everything. It all started in what seemed like an ordinary life. Clara and I had been married for 18 years. Our days were a repetitive cycle of work, taking care of our 2 kids, and trying to squeeze in moments for each other. But somewhere along the line, those moments for each other became fewer and farther between. Clara was always busy with the kids or her book club, and I was caught up in the demands of my job in finance. We were like 2 ships passing in the night, and I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of neglect. I missed the passion, the excitement, and the connection we once had. At work, there was Julie, a colleague of mine. She was vibrant, full of life, and she listened to me. Our conversations began innocently enough, just 2 coworkers chatting about our days. But as the weeks went by, I found myself looking forward to our talks more and more. She seemed to understand me in a way Clara no longer did. It was during one late evening at the office when things changed. Julie and I were working on a project together, and we ended up having dinner. The atmosphere was different, charged with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I knew I was treading on dangerous ground, but I couldn't stop myself. There was something about her that drew me in. The late nights at work became more frequent, and soon, our relationship took a turn. It started with a casual touch, a lingering look, and before I knew it, we were entangled in an affair. I told myself it was just a physical thing, that it didn't change the way I felt about Clara and my family. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I was leading a double life, and the thrill of it was intoxicating. With Julie, I felt alive, desired, something I hadn't felt in years with Clara. But every night, I returned home to my family, playing the role of the devoted husband and father. The guilt was there, gnawing at the back of my mind, but I pushed it away. I wasn't ready to face the consequences of my actions, not yet. So, this was how it began. A routine that turned into a yearning for something more, a desire that led me down a path I never thought I'd take. A path that would eventually lead to my undoing. As days turned into weeks, my interactions with Julie evolved from mere workplace camaraderie into something more intimate and personal. Our conversations, once centered around mundane work topics, now delved into our personal lives, dreams, and frustrations. I found in Julie a confidant, someone who listened intently to my complaints about my stagnant marriage and my longing for excitement. Julie was different from Clara in many ways. She was adventurous, always eager to try new things, and her zest for life was infectious. This contrast only highlighted the growing void in my marriage. Clara, once my closest friend and partner, now seemed more like a distant roommate, preoccupied with her own world. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Julie and I found ourselves alone in the office. The conversation shifted from casual to personal, and the air between us crackled with unspoken tension. It was then that the boundaries began to blur. A playful touch, a shared laugh, a moment too long. The line between professional and personal was crossed. We began to meet outside of work, initially under the guise of discussing work projects, but soon these meetings turned into dinners, and dinners turned into more. I was fully aware of the slippery slope I was on, yet the excitement of this new relationship was overpowering. I rationalized my actions by telling myself that as long as there was no physical infidelity, I wasn't really betraying Clara. However, the emotional bond with Julie was strengthening, and it wasn't long before our relationship took a physical turn. The first kiss was a moment of surrender to all the pent-up emotions and desires. It felt like a release, a break from the monotony of my life. The thrill of the secret rendezvous, the rush of doing something forbidden, was exhilarating. Back at home, I became more distant from Clara. I was physically present but emotionally absent. Our conversations were superficial, and I found myself getting irritated by the smallest things. The more time I spent with Julie, the more I realized how unhappy I was in my marriage. I was living a lie, juggling two lives. But in those moments with Julie, I didn't think about the consequences. I was consumed by the present, ignoring the inevitable fallout that this affair, cloaked in secrecy and driven by a yearning for something different, was a ticking time bomb, and I was blissfully unaware of the destruction it would eventually cause. As my affair with Julie intensified, so did the complexities of leading a double life. I became adept at juggling my time between my family and Julie, fabricating work-related excuses for my absences at home. Each lie I told Clara and my kids was a brick in the wall I was building around my secret life. The office became our sanctuary, a place where Julie and I could be together without suspicion. We were careful, always mindful of prying eyes, but the thrill of our secret added an intoxicating edge to our relationship. We stole moments whenever we could, in between meetings, during late work nights, and sometimes even during business trips. At home, Clara seemed increasingly distant, absorbed in her own world of parenting and her social activities. Our interactions were reduced to discussions about the kids' schedules, household chores, and occasional small talk. The emotional gap between us widened with each passing day, and I found myself feeling less guilty about my time with Julie. The duality of my life was draining, yet I continued. With Julie, I felt a sense of freedom and escape from the responsibilities that weighed me down at home. She provided an escape from reality, a world where I didn't have to play the roles that had defined my life for so long. However, living a double life took its toll. I was constantly on edge, worried that Clara would discover my affair. I meticulously managed my phone, emails, and social media to ensure no trace of my infidelity. The stress of maintaining this facade began to affect me, causing sleepless nights and a constant sense of anxiety. Despite the risks, I couldn't bring myself to end things with Julie. I was trapped in a cycle of exhilaration and apprehension, each reckless step taking me further away from the life I had built with Clara. As the months went by, the strain of my double life started to manifest in more visible ways. I became more irritable at home, often snapping at Clara and the kids over trivial matters. Clara, sensing something was amiss, began to ask more probing questions about my whereabouts and my sudden changes in behavior. I reassured her with lies, telling her that work was just particularly stressful. She seemed to accept these explanations, but I could see the worry in her eyes. The foundation of our marriage was cracking, and I was the one wielding the hammer, all the while living a lie that was spiraling out of control. The balance I had struggled to maintain between my two worlds began to waver under the weight of Clara's growing suspicions. It started with subtle changes in her behavior. She asked more questions about my work schedule, about the late nights and sudden business trips. Her eyes, once filled with trust, now flickered with doubt and uncertainty. I noticed her glancing at my phone more often, her gaze lingering a little too long. I became more cautious, deleting messages and call logs, ensuring my phone was never left unattended. The lies grew in complexity and number, each one a desperate attempt to cover my tracks. Clara's intuition seemed to sharpen with every lie I told. She started to call me randomly throughout the day, her voice tinged with an anxious edge that wasn't there before. Sometimes she'd ask to meet for lunch unexpectedly, her invitations more a test than a gesture of affection. I could feel the walls closing in, my carefully constructed facade starting to crumble. At work, Julie and I continued our affair, but the initial thrill was now overshadowed by the fear of getting caught. We became more discreet, limiting our interactions to avoid raising suspicions among our colleagues. But the connection between us remained strong, a dangerous pull that I couldn't resist. As the gap between Clara and me widened, our home life became strained. We were like strangers living under the same roof, only going through the motions of a normal family life. Our conversations were brief and functional, lacking the warmth and intimacy we once shared. The guilt started to eat away at me, but it was overshadowed by a selfish desire to hold on to both relationships. I was caught in a web of my own making, each lie a thread holding together a fragile construct that could collapse at any moment. One evening, Clara confronted me directly. Her eyes were filled with a mix of pain and defiance as she asked if there was someone else. I looked into her eyes and lied, telling her she was the only one for me. I saw the conflict in her eyes, the desire to believe me battling with her doubts. She wanted to trust me, to return to the normalcy we once had, but the seeds of doubt had taken root. That night, as I lay next to Clara, the magnitude of my betrayal weighed heavily on me. I realized I was not only lying to her but also to myself. I was living in a self-made illusion, blinded by the thrill of the affair, yet unable to see the inevitable consequences of my actions. This game of deception was a ticking time bomb, and I was the one holding the detonator. But in my arrogance and selfishness, I failed to see the impending destruction that my lies would bring. The day everything came crashing down started like any other. I left for work early, exchanging a perfunctory goodbye with Clara, who seemed more distant than ever. Little did I know that by the time I returned home, my carefully constructed world would be in ruins. At work, Julie and I carried on with our usual routine, stealing moments when we could. However, there was an underlying tension, a sense of impending doom that I tried to ignore. I left the office late, as had become my habit, and headed home, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. When I walked through the door, Clara was waiting for me in the living room. The moment I saw her face, I knew something was wrong. Her eyes were red, and there was a pile of printed emails on the coffee table. My heart sank as I realized what they were: proof of my affair with Julie. Clara had gone through my computer. In my overconfidence, I had become careless, leaving traces of my infidelity. The emails detailed everything: our secret meetings, our intimate conversations, and plans for future rendezvous. There was no denying it, the evidence was overwhelming. The confrontation was intense and emotional. Clara's pain and anger were palpable as she demanded answers. I stood there, unable to speak, the lies that had once flowed so easily now stuck in my throat. The truth was laid bare, and with it came the crushing weight of my betrayal. Clara's hurt turned to fury as she recounted how she had trusted me, how she had defended me against her own suspicions, and how I had repaid her trust with deceit. I had no defense, no justification for my actions. I had destroyed the foundation of our marriage with my selfishness. The discussion lasted for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. Clara told me she could not stay in a marriage devoid of trust. She was heartbroken but resolute. Our life together, the family we had built, was shattered by my actions. That night, I slept in the guest room, alone with my thoughts and the wreckage of my decisions. The gravity of what I had done was overwhelming. I had lost the woman I had promised to love and cherish, and I had hurt her in the worst possible way. The realization that I had destroyed my family was a sobering awakening. In pursuing my selfish desires, I had lost the most important people in my life. The consequences of my actions were clear, and the road ahead was one of regret and loneliness. The reality of my betrayal had set in, and with it, the understanding that some mistakes can never be undone. The morning after the confrontation was a somber affair. The house, once filled with the sounds of a bustling family, was now eerily silent. Clara was distant, her movements mechanical as she prepared breakfast for the kids. I tried to talk to her, to somehow start the process of mending what I had broken, but she was unresponsive, her pain too raw for words. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in our home was one of a ceaseless coldness. Clara had moved into the spare room, and our interactions were limited to necessary communication about the kids. The love and warmth that had once been the cornerstone of our home had vanished, replaced by an unbridgeable chasm of hurt and betrayal. The kids sensed that change. They asked questions, their innocent eyes searching for answers I couldn't provide. I watched as my family, the very essence of my life, crumbled before my eyes. The guilt and shame I felt were indescribable, a constant companion in the wake of my selfish actions. Clara eventually decided that she needed time away to think and to heal. She took the kids and went to stay with her sister. The house, once a symbol of our life together, now felt like a mausoleum of memories and broken promises. I was left alone, surrounded by the remnants of the life I had destroyed. The loneliness was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the life I had led just weeks before. My affair with Julie, which had once seemed so thrilling, now felt hollow and meaningless. Julie, sensing the shift in my situation, became distant, eventually ending our affair with a brief message. I was left with nothing but the consequences of my actions. The realization that I had lost everything hit me with full force. Clara, the woman I had loved and vowed to spend my life with, was gone, her trust in me shattered. My children, who had once looked up to me, now saw me as the reason for their broken family. My home felt like a prison, a constant reminder of the life I had so carelessly thrown away. In my pursuit of something more, I had not only lost my family but also my sense of self. I was no longer the man I thought I was, nor the man my family needed me to be. The weight of my decisions bore heavily on me, a burden I would carry for the rest of my life. As I sat in the quiet of the empty house, the full impact of my betrayal became painfully clear. I had sacrificed everything for a fleeting moment of happiness, and in doing so, I had lost everything that truly mattered. The fall from grace was complete, and the road ahead was one of regret and solitude. In the wake of Clara and the kids leaving, the house felt more like a tomb than a home. The silence was oppressive, each room echoing with the ghosts of laughter and love that once filled them. I roamed through the empty spaces, a constant reminder of the life I had squandered. Julie, who had been a source of excitement and escape, now seemed like a stranger. Our affair, once thrilling, had lost its allure in the harsh light of reality. She too sensed the change and decided to end our relationship, citing the complexities and guilt associated with our situation. Her departure was swift, leaving me to face the consequences of my actions alone. The loneliness was suffocating. I missed my family desperately, but I also knew I had no right to their affection or forgiveness. The trust one had broken was irreplaceable, the damage I had caused irreparable. I tried to reach out to Clara, sending messages and making calls, but she remained unresponsive. The finality of her silence was a clear message. I was alone. Work became my only refuge, but even there, I was haunted by memories of Julie and the affair. My colleagues, unaware of the full extent of my personal turmoil, tiptoed around me, sensing the change but not understanding its cause. I felt isolated, trapped in a self-made purgatory. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. My life had become a cycle of work and solitude. The absence of my family was a constant ache, a reminder of the joy and love I had lost. I looked at photos of us, happier times before my selfishness ruined everything. The smiling faces of my children were a stark contrast to the broken family we had become. In this solitude, I was forced to confront the reality of who I had become. I had betrayed the people who meant the most to me for a fleeting thrill. The magnitude of my selfishness was overwhelming. I had abandoned the vows I made to Clara, the responsibilities I had as a father, all for a misguided pursuit of happiness. The realization that I was solely responsible for my predicament was a bitter pill to swallow. I had expected happiness to come from external sources, only to find that it left me more hollow than before. I had sought validation and excitement in the arms of another, only to lose the genuine love and life I had with Clara and my children. As the reality of my situation sank in, I was left to grapple with the consequences of my choices. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with regret and self-reflection. The man I had been was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. The journey ahead was one of learning to live with the choices I had made, a journey of finding a way to move forward from the ruins of a life I had once cherished. The days following my complete abandonment by Julie and the distancing of my family were a blur of introspection and regret. Each morning, I woke to the stark reality of my empty house, a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions. The routine I had once found suffocating now seemed like a distant, comforting memory. I attempted to reach out to Clara, not with the hope of reconciliation, but to apologize, to somehow express the remorse that was eating away at me. Each unanswered call and unreturned message was a reminder of the trust one had shattered. I understood her silence, it was the price I had to pay for my betrayal. Work provided little distraction. The place where my affair with Julie had blossomed and now felt oppressive, a constant reminder of my moral failings. My colleagues, who once enjoyed my company, now gave me a wide berth, sensing the personal turmoil that lay beneath my forced composure. In this period of isolation, I was forced to confront the man I had become. I spent long nights reflecting on my choices, trying to understand how I had strayed so far from the person I once prided myself on being. The realization hit hard. I had been selfish, chasing an illusion of happiness while sacrificing the real joy and love I had at home. Memories of the times I had spent with Clara and the kids haunted me. The vacations, the birthdays, the simple joys of everyday life. All now seemed like relics of a past life, a life I had willingly jeopardized for a fleeting affair. The full weight of what I had lost settled heavily on my shoulders. In an effort to find some solace, I started seeing a therapist. The sessions were difficult, a deep dive into my motivations, my fears, and my deep-seated insecurities. I had to face some hard truths about myself, about the void I had tried to fill with an extramarital affair, and about the pain I had inflicted on the people I loved most. As the weeks turned into months, I slowly started to accept the reality of my situation. My marriage was over, my family was gone, and I was alone. The journey of self-reflection was painful but necessary. I learned that happiness could not be found in the arms of another, but had to be cultivated within myself. I started to take responsibility for my actions. I apologized to the people I had hurt, not expecting forgiveness, but as a way to acknowledge the pain I had caused. I began to focus on personal growth, trying to learn from my mistakes, to become a better person than the one who had caused so much pain. The process of coming to terms with my actions was a long and arduous journey. It was a path filled with regret and self-realization, but it was a necessary one. I understood that I could not change the past, but I could shape my future. The first step was accepting the consequences of my actions and learning to live with them. Months had passed since my life as I knew it had crumbled. In this time of solitude and reflection, the harsh lessons of my actions had become clear. The path to redemption, I realized, was not through seeking forgiveness from those I had wronged, but in understanding and forgiving myself. I dedicated myself to therapy, grappling with the issues that had led me down the path of infidelity. My therapist helped me see that my actions were not just a betrayal of my family, but a betrayal of my own values and the man I wanted to be. It was a painful realization, but it was also the first step towards real change. I started volunteering at a local community center. Helping others gave me a sense of purpose, a way to give back that was absent in my life for so long. In giving, I found a kind of peace, a respite from the turmoil that had become my constant companion. As I worked on myself, I also tried to rebuild the bridges I had burned. I wrote letters to Clara and the kids, not to plead for their return, but to express my regret and my love. I didn't always get a response, but when I did, it was a balm to my aching heart. The kids, in their innocence, were more forgiving, and we started having occasional visits. These moments with them were precious, a reminder of what I had lost and what I hoped to one day rebuild, even if only in a small way. In these letters and visits, I avoided speaking of Julie or the affair. That part of my life was a closed chapter, one that I had learned from but did not wish to revisit. My focus was on the future, on healing and hopefully, one day, on rebuilding. Clara, for her part, remained distant. The hurt I had caused was deep, and I understood that some wounds take a long time to heal, if they ever do. I respected her space, her need to heal in her own way, away from the man who had caused her so much pain. The journey of self-improvement is a never-ending one. Each day presented its own challenges, but also its own opportunities for growth. I embraced these opportunities, learning to be kinder to myself and to those around me. My story is not one of a happy ending, but it is one of hope. Hope that even in our darkest moments, we can find a light. Hope that even when we fall, we have the strength to get back up. And hope that even the most broken of relationships can, in time and with effort, find some form of healing. As I write this, I am still on my journey, a journey of self-discovery and redemption. I have come to terms with the fact that some things can never be fully mended, but I also know that from the ashes of my past, a new, better version of myself can emerge. My story is a testament to the fact that while we cannot change the past, we can learn from it and become better for it. The seasons changed, and with them, so did I. The journey of self-discovery and redemption was not easy, but it was necessary. I learned to live with the consequences of my actions, understanding that some things, once broken, can never be put back together in the same way. My relationship with my children slowly improved. Our visits, although infrequent, became moments I cherished deeply. They were growing up so fast, and I regretted every moment I had lost with them. But in these new moments, I found a chance to show them the father I wanted to be, even if it was from a distance. Clara remained a part of my life, albeit in a very different way. We communicated mostly about the kids, keeping our conversations brief and to the point. The pain I had caused her was still evident in her eyes, and I accepted that some wounds I had inflicted were too deep to ever fully heal. Despite this, there was a mutual understanding between us, a silent acknowledgement of the shared history and love that once bound us. Professionally, I had become more focused. The affair and its fallout had taught me the importance of integrity, both in my personal and professional life. I worked hard, not just to occupy my time, but to rebuild the sense of self-worth that I had lost in the chaos of my personal life. In my personal time, I continued to volunteer and found solace in helping others. It was a way to atone, in a small way, for the pain I had caused. Through this work, I met new people and formed new friendships, relationships built on the person I was becoming, not the one I had been. Therapy remained a constant in my life, a safe space to unravel the complexities of my emotions and actions. It was there that I learned the most about myself, about the need for validation that had driven so much of my behavior, and about the ways I could find that validation within myself rather than in others. I won't say I found complete peace. There were days when the weight of my past actions felt overwhelming. But in those moments, I reminded myself of how far I had come, of the lessons learned, and of the person I was striving to be. This chapter of my life is not a story of victory or of a happy ending. It's a story of a man who made mistakes, who faced the consequences, and who learned to grow from them. It's a story of loss and pain, but also of hope and redemption. It's a story of moving forward, not just for myself, but for the people I care about, and for those I have yet to meet. In sharing this story, I hope to offer a lesson, that our actions have consequences, that the path to redemption is hard but worth walking, and that no matter how far we fall, there is always a way to rise again, stronger and wiser. My journey continues, a path not towards a destination, but towards becoming a better version of myself, each